thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, God. It's hot in a fiery furnace. 7 times hotter than an olive tree. So hot it burned up the soldiers, but not Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So the story comes from the book of Daniel. And Daniel and his young friends were taken captive by the Babylonians and taken back to Babylon. They were in Jerusalem. And so the story goes that they were young men of the royal house, and King Nebuchadnezzar was looking for someone that he could use, knowing that they would probably be very smart individuals and very useful to his kingdom. And so when Daniel and his 3 friends, among others, showed up as part of the captives, what happened was that Daniel would not eat the king's food. It was anathema to his soul. And the person who was over these captives says, oh, but you must eat so that you will be fat and you will be useful. And Daniel said, give me 10 days on vegetables and we will prove that we'll be just as good as everybody else. Give me 10 days on what feeds my soul and I will be as good as anybody else. And that worked. And so King Nebuchadnezzar was so enthralled by this fact that he put Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in charge of the area of Babylon, at least part supervising. It doesn't say how far in the book of Daniel. And everything was fine. And the kids, the young men, got along fine, and life wasn't so bad, was it? Not for them. They didn't think so. I mean, they weren't fully free, but they were living in the royal house, and they were living royally. But then, even though King Nebuchadnezzar knew that these young men had a god of their own, he, in his way of worshiping, was an idol worshiper. So he created this gold idol. And these 3 men did not bow down to it. And so they were called on the court, so to speak, and given one more chance. And they would not bow down. And King Nebuchadnezzar said, who is going to save you from me? The law says I'm putting you in the fiery furnace. And so the 3 young men said, our God will save us. And so that's where this whole story came from. And indeed, he did save them. So I want to make some points out of this story. The first point I want to make is that life often takes us to a place of captivity, whether we recognize it or not. There are situations in life we just don't control. So we say, where's the justice in that? Where's the justice in that? Gary Zukav says in The Seat of the Soul, the non-judgmental justice is the freedom of seeing what you see and experiencing what you experience without responding negatively. It relieves you of the self-appointed job of judge and jury because you know that everything is being seen. Nothing escapes the law of karma. And this brings forth understanding and compassion. When we look at things metaphysically, and we look at the idea of Daniel and what his name means metaphysically, it means spiritual judgment. We have to rise above what we think of as judgment on this plane, this material plane that we live in, and raise it up to a higher consciousness. So, we live in the world and not of it. That's what Jesus asked us to understand. Jesus, our way shower. To live in the world and not of it. So the justice is being able to live in the world, to see what's going on in the world and not get caught up in it. So when we find ourselves captive by whatever's going on, and right now there's much going on in the world. There's much fear, there's much hatred, there's much bigotry, there is much terrorism, much going on in the world. We are called to raise our consciousness up higher, to live in the world and not of it, to live as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did, being there, doing what you need to do, but keeping your mind on your God and not the idol. The second point that I want to make is we can learn to live within the experiences without succumbing to them. Oftentimes we are put in a place where there's propaganda all over the place. And sometimes it's good propaganda, but more importantly, it's not so good propaganda. And it's up to us to use our own critical thinking to determine and establish what is and what isn't. As we learn, as we read, as we research, then if we take it to prayer and we ask our own higher consciousness, what is this really about? What is this really saying to me? Is it important for me to get caught up in it? Then we will get the truth, that it is an experience and what the experience brings to us to learn. There were 3 individuals that went into the fiery furnace because they would not succumb to the idols. They kept their mind on God. They knew that whatever was happening, that they would be okay. They would be okay. We have so many idols, and sometimes we don't know the subtle idols that are in our life. It could be the idol of the person that you live with, who says you really need to do it this way, so you do it this way to keep them quiet. Sometimes my dog is my idol. He barks too much, so I do it his way to keep him quiet. So he becomes my idol. I often say that we teach people how to treat us. We train them, and I think my dog has been training me more than I've been training my dog. There are the idols of money, of course. There's the idols of wanting to be in a place where you feel okay with your peers. How often has something within you called you to speak up and speak out, and you don't because you don't want to be in that place where you say something that you don't feel that your peers would accept? That's an idol. There are so many little idols when we look at it, because it's coming from out here, how we're thinking we are out here, instead of being true to who we are inside of us. Jack Boland says, the most amazing thing happens when you begin to examine yourself. One of the most remarkable discoveries in life is when you look within and make a conscious decision to stop changing everyone and everything else and begin the process of transforming yourself. We are called not to become transformed to other individuals and their thinking, not to be conformed to social norms. I'm not saying now not to be in step so that it's comfortable, because Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did that being in the land of Babylon. Babylon, when you look at it metaphysically, is that idea of a confused state of mind. And when we're in a confused state of mind, what we need to do is be in a place where we can know that we're in a confused state of mind and not make decisions on the confusion, but go to that higher place. Go to that that place where we may end up in the fiery furnace. When choosing the higher road, our higher selves, God, good, will always prevail. 7 times hotter, burned up the soldiers. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, not a hair was harmed, they didn't even smell of smoke. And indeed, there was a 4th in the fire with them. That 4th was the angel that was sent to keep them straight. In the book of Daniel, after they came out, after they were called out by Nebuchadnezzar, he said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted him. They disobeyed the king's command and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own God." And afterwards, not only did they prevail, but Nebuchadnezzar said, "Your God is such an awesome God that I'm going to promote you in the land of Babylon." You see, when we take our thoughts and we use them appropriately, as we are guided by our inner guidance, it brings us up to an even higher way of being. The fiery furnace, as they were put in, they were bound. As they came out, they were unbound, they were free. They were actually free in the furnace. Have you ever had that freedom within you when you've made a decision and you've said and you've done what you really knew that you had to do, no matter how painful it was? Your emotions were telling you that it just really, really hurt to do it. But your heart was telling you this is what you had to say, or this is what you had to do. Have you ever had that feeling as you stood in the fire of knowing that you were free? That peace beyond understanding. The Revealing Word, written by Charles Fillmore, in there, he defines the fiery furnace metaphysically as a state of mind in which one goes through purifying process and evil and error are destroyed. It's that place where we go through that purifying process. When we're in a place where it's the rock and the hard place, I know all of us have been there more than once, more than twice, probably more than 10, 20, 30 times. When we're in that place between the rock and the hard place and we have to make the decision, when we go to prayer, that decision will come forth in ways that are beyond knowing. And the way that we know that is when we're open and receptive to seeing God in everything, we find those moments that show us, so that when we're in those places of the rock and the hard place, we have a faith already established. I had an interesting thing happen yesterday. Many of you know that I am a widow, and I've been a widow for 6 years now. Many of you know that my husband served in the military. He actually served in the Army during the Vietnam years, but he was actually stationed in Korea during the Vietnam years. I got a text. No, I didn't get a text. I got an instant message yesterday that showed up and said, "We have the medals for Thornton E. Conkle." And this was in DeLand. We picked them up DeLand in a church sale. And so, as is, in clarity, my mind went to scam. So I was very careful how I answered it, because I know I have his medals, right? I have his medals. So I answered back, he doesn't do shadow boxing. I have his medals, because they were in a shadow box. I have his medals. The name is right, and he did serve in the military. I didn't say what years. I don't know whose they belong to. I don't know if there is another name. Then the lady who had gotten a hold of me actually took a picture of the meadows so I could see the name, so I could see the RA number. And I went to the files and I pulled them out. In between that time, I went for a walk with my dog. And as I'm on my walk with my dog, I'm going, what is this all about, God? And this beautiful yellow butterfly with black all over it was flying all around me and the dog. Not just once, not just twice, for about 2 minutes. And I started to think, my daughter lived in the land at one point. Perhaps she had some medals that I did not know that he had given her. So I went and I made a call to her. Meanwhile, I pulled out the box, got out his things, looked at his RA number, and it was the exact same number. I'm looking at the medals I have, and 2 of the medals look the same. So I actually got into contact with the lady, and the lady does have my daughter's medals. My daughter thought she had the medals, but when she moved, she had left some of the things behind with a family member from her ex-husband, and evidently they got out somewhere somehow. This is how I grow my faith. This woman who found these medals paid $1 for them. Medals shouldn't even be for sale. $1 for them at a church sale. Took the time and effort to look me up and get these medals back to my daughter. Now, if there wasn't something bigger than us involved in that, it would have never happened. I don't call that coincidence. I call that God at work. This is how we build our faith so that when we're in that place of captivity, when we're in that place where we feel that we are not sure we can trust our faith, we have these things to look back on. The fire we are put into is the fire of our own souls. The angel is the alchemy that changes us from the raw material that we are right here now in this material state into the steel that we become as the God beings that we are. We not only come out of the furnace unharmed, but gleaming and prepared to do the greater work that God has for us. And we do that by saying yes to being our authentic self. The challenge for this week is to perceive where you are feeling that you are being held in captive in some area of your life. Say yes to God, knowing it may be necessary that you be put in a furnace, knowing that being in that furnace will only transform you to your higher self. God bless you.